You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Tracy Murda, and this is the Future Tech Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Alon Muroch, co-founder and CEO at Blox. Alon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Alon, I'd love to get started with a little bit of background on yourself and what got you involved in the crypto blockchain space in the first place.
Sure. So I'm a developer. I've been developing and just coding since I can remember myself. Actually, I got into blockchain by accident. I've heard about Bitcoin just before I really got into what it means and kind of diving into the technology from a friend who was kind of always mentioning it around the dinner table and around friends. And at first we kind of laughed at the idea. But then I had to actually, at the time I studied in Rome, and I had to move a bit of euros from my bank account to my Italian bank account. I was a student, so I think it was around 5,000 euros or something. And actually, the bank teller told me that it's going to cost me a lot of money, but even she didn't know how much because it was. She said the money will go through several different banks along the way, and so it kind of hit me. I think it was back in 2012 or 2013, and it kind of hit me that I don't know what this Bitcoin thing is all about, but it's definitely, the way the system works, it's definitely, there's something more to achieve because there's no way in 2012, 2013, it was still kind of, transferring money with that ancient system and nobody knows how much it costs, nobody knows when it gets there and so on. And so that's kind of the pivot point for me when I started to dig into the technology and it took me about a week, I think, to read the original Satoshi paper, and after that, I was.
And I think I would ask, what is the importance of what it is you all do? But I think it's probably pretty obvious. I mean, we all want our own data and information, especially financial, and shouldn't have to pay for it. So what was it that brought you to discover to create Blox? What actually is Blox?
So Blox is the mission for Blox, the company, is to create tools for professionals to manage and engage with their crypto assets. And it really was kind of born from a very kind of selfish problem I had that I didn't have back then a tool where I can sync all my different wallets and exchange accounts into one place automatically, let the data flow automatically, and really have a nice user experience doing so. And so I've kind of decided to do it on my own. And this is kind of the reason why Blox was created. And as time went by, we really realized that we can bring a lot of value to professionals. So people or organizations that really engage on a day-to-day basis with crypto assets. And we empower them with tools to make that engagement as efficient as possible. So the core idea is still there, enabling them to automatically track all of their transactional data and sync and normalize that data. And on top of that, building a ton of necessary features like bookkeeping and reporting and collaboration and so on that really are the fundamental building blocks of any modern company. And even more so when you're talking about a crypto company. And so that's what Blox mission is and what we're developing.
So most companies that are in the space that are interacting or using crypto assets on a daily basis. What are they generally using when you're talking about, different types of crypto, different types of assets? What is it without Blox? What are they using?
So without Blox, they're basically using an Excel sheet, which is crazy. I mean, yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, I think that what happened between kind of early 2017 and up until this point basically is, although everything really exploded, as everyone knows, but the whole industry had to mature very fast. And a lot of companies and individuals found themselves managing ridiculous amounts of money with really no means. So, if you think about it, I always give that idea or kind of example that during 2017, you had huge companies managing hundreds of millions of dollars with really no governance structure inside of them, really no tracking, reporting around their financials. And it's not because they didn't try to, but just didn't have the means, and so they kind of relegated towards using just an Excel sheet and managing a lot of money in a complicated company with complicated processes and different services. It's really hard. It's impossible, really. And so that's kind of the way we see it, and really that's our biggest fight even today. I mean, spreading the word out and letting people know there's a much better solution for everything they're doing in terms of their operations, finances, back office, when it comes to crypto assets. So basically give them the tool to really kind of order and make sure that they're tidied up around all of their kind of back office activities, mid office activities, which are basically the backbone of their operation. And so a lot of the new kind of users we are onboarding are really making that transition from an Excel sheet towards an automated system.
I was going to say, when you're talking about an Excel sheet, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I hate Excel on a daily basis, let alone using it for something complex. I would imagine that there is huge room for human error and just nuisances that are within the Excel program.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's I don't remember exactly the title, but there's a huge article written on a company which is by accident not a crypto company. I think it was a financial institution where they lost billions of dollars because somebody by mistake wrote the wrong numbers in the Excel sheet, and they used an Excel sheet as their model for hedging, which is crazy, right? So by accident,
I remember that,
company,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so by accident, it's not a crypto company, but you can imagine the complexity of a crypto company and the mistakes you can actually inflict on yourself without even knowing. So obviously, the first thing that everyone is going through is ordering their books, doing tax and auditing and all of those things. And the room for error there is very, very minimal, and you can make a mistake without even knowing it, and it's not a pat on the back mistake. If you're managing $100 million and you've made a mistake of 5%, $5 million, that's a real problem. That's a real issue. That's a real issue with the different IRS or your auditors. It's an issue with your board of directors. It's an issue with maybe future potential investors. That's a big issue. And so you need to make sure that there's actually a personal responsibility on the C-level executive. You need to make sure that your finances and records are intact and you have all the information and data. It's simply not possible with Excel sheets. And then you go to tax optimizations and reporting and so on. Even the practical stuff, right? I mean, if you your company is making maybe, I don't know, 100, 200 payments, transfers a month or a day or a week, it might be even not practical to even write it manually. So what you'll do is you're just aggregate, and aggregation obviously hides data. And so there's the place where mistakes happen. So it's not a lot of the time. It's not even a question if it's manual. Just takes more time. It's in some cases impractical. And so yeah, I mean, we definitely need to kind of pair this usage and of Excel sheets as their kind of a solution for managing billions of dollars worth of crypto. Definitely.
So what are some of the main or the most special features for Blox?
So Blox was, again, founded on the idea that we want to make sure that your transactional data, balance data, and so on are, first of all, very, very robust in the terms of how do you get it and complete and so on. So we're a data first company, so that's kind of the first thing we do. We make sure that your data is intact. So whenever you onboard yourself into Blox, we bring your transactional history and make sure that every 5 to 10 minutes you're getting the new transactions you've executed and so on. On top of that, there's a lot of layers of reporting and collaboration and bookkeeping features and exporting features, really kind of the A to Z to manage and make sure that all of your records are intact. So, for example, for transactional data, we have notifications to let you know that you received or sent money. Then you have the ability to tag those transactions, add notes, add attachments, export all of this data, categorize your transaction. You have a really cool feature we've released about 2 months ago where Blox automatically a snapshot of all of your assets once a day, which is a crucial kind of feature for reconciliation, especially against exchanges. I don't know if you are aware, but exchange APIs are very, very, let's say, not involved in the crypto space. And a lot of really top-end companies find themselves doubting if the data coming from the exchanges where they're managing and trading is it actually correct. And so we did that feature in order to kind of reconcile against against the transactional data coming from the exchanges. So again, it's even a security and feature because it lets you double check that your records are correct. And more features. Again, all of those are basically built from, a lot of them are built from feedback getting from our clients. So a client might kind of find himself with an issue, he needs to resolve it. And so we are in a position to really take those issues and create solutions for them on a daily basis. So all of those things are basically what drives the operations, finances, and reporting in those companies.
How do you ensure that the data being kept is completely safe and private? I mean, those are obviously things that, are critical to any service such as this.
Yeah, absolutely. So privacy and security are obviously main concerns for everyone, but especially when you're talking about financial data. And so, first of all, Blox is a read-only platform, which means we connect to public keys and so on. So we're in no point in time we will ask your private key, nor we are a custodian of your assets. And so that's the first line of defense. We put a lot of effort in the way we design the system and the way we test it all the time with third-party penetration testing and auditing and so on to make sure that we're up to date with all the vulnerabilities and fix them as soon as possible and make sure there's none of them. And obviously, again, we put a lot of effort in making sure that the privacy is preserved for the clients themselves. With features, for example, like with API keys for exchanges, we constantly testing to make sure that the permissions do not exceed what we expect, which are read-only and so on. So we actually, a lot of the times, actually provide them better security because we have the automated testing on our end. There's a lot of emphasis going on in making sure that the clients feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, this is a very sensitive data. But we also need to keep in mind what's the alternative, what's the kind of what they can do other than using Blox. And as we mentioned before, it's an Excel sheet. So, if they're using Google Excel sheets, that's a terrible idea because Google Excel sheets are by definition built to be shared with the world, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do with your financial data. And normal Excel files like Microsoft Excel, well, those files, you basically share them by sending them via email, which is even worse than Google Excel. So the alternative is really, really bad. And so by using a dedicated system like Blox, you really first of all, you eliminate all of those things, but also increase your level of security and privacy. It's really important to understand that there's real consequences in using the wrong tool for such sensitive data.
So who is using Blox? Who would be your ideal user?
So our ideal user is what we call the professional crypto holder, or anyone who's day-to-day is interacting with crypto assets. So it could be traders, it could be post-ICO companies or product companies, funds, and so on. So basically, we look for those companies where their engagement on a day-to-day basis is great, because then we can actually give them the great value Blox can give. And so those are kind of our users. So again, it's professional individuals. It's professional individuals inside organizations and companies, both ICO companies, product companies, funds, and so on.
What do you all have coming up within this coming year? I'm sure there's many changes when it comes to regulation, when it comes to new developments in the space. What are some things that we can look forward to with Blox?
So we actually find ourselves helping a lot of the people that are in organizations that actually need to enforce regulation. So, for example, we're working with a lot of accounting firms, because at the end of the day, they are the first line of defense. They need to audit a lot of those crypto companies, and they really don't have the tools, the technological tools to do that. So we give them those tools, and they love it. In terms of regulation, I think that there's kind of there's a lot of obviously news and advancements in the past year, but I think people started to understand what the things to do and not to do, and also I think the regulator. I mean, I think that although crypto winter is hit the industry pretty bad, I think it still presents an opportunity to build, and we certainly do that. We expand all the time, but I think it's really the opportunity to have a second look around and find the opportunities both in regulation, but also in technology, product fit, and so on.
Now, Blox has a lot of different, or several, I should say, different plans or packages. Tell me a little bit about each and what are the differences and what's good for who, et cetera.
Differences between Blox and competitors, or just in general?
No, the different plans within Blox.
Oh, right. So some of the plans we can talk about, and some we'll just have to wait and see when we're comfortable releasing them. One of the things we are working on in terms of the product is actually two things. So one is there's a big release coming out where we really reimagine the way transactional data should be interacted with. We went with a really cool concept, which is kind of Gmail based, to really enable people working with crypto assets, transactional data, to really keep them up to date on everything that's happened, and that's supposed to be released in several batches in the next month. But we also already working on our plans for Q2 and Q3, which basically will include a lot of the feedback we got from clients. So there's a lot of conversation around taxation and cost calculation, execution of transactions directly from Blox, so the ability to connect your ledger or treasure wallets directly to Blox and send and receive transactions, by still kind of maintaining the level of security, high level of security ledger and treasure enable. So there's a lot going on, and a few other kind of plans which are still secret. But again, we really aim and move ourselves to be kind of an A to Z solution for those people. I mean, they are really thirsty to have a one-stop shop for all of their needs, and there's a lot of them as the industry evolves. The needs and requirements keep on growing, and so we need to match those needs and make sure that we give them a really, really appealing package and value.
And Alon, you mentioned earlier, you kind of touched on it by accident, actually. You mentioned competitors. Is there anyone else in this space doing what Blox is doing or trying to do what Blox is doing?
So I think that by far our biggest competitor, as I said before, is the Excel sheet. I mean, 95% of the potential clients we talk with are basically using Excel sheets. Of course, there are other competitors. I can mention probably Libra and CoinTracker, but I think every single one of them is kind of tackling a different problem. There's obviously parts which are overlapping, but I think there's a lot as time goes on. There's more and more things that happening inside each of those platforms, which kind of pulls them apart. And so it really depends on your business and what you're looking for. We really feel that blocks in each segment of post-ICO companies, funds, product companies, and so on is best of the breed. I mean, by far, I think we have the best.
I'm still just shaking my head every time you say Excel. I mean, I guess it's an obvious answer, or it's an obvious mode of doing this kind of business, but it just seems so crazy that all of these high risk, high value transactions are being done through such an easily manipulated and easily error-filled kind of method. It's just crazy to me.
It's incredible. I mean, but again, I mean, we need to really go back in 2017 and understand kind of the mode of operations, because they didn't have any, and us included, right? I mean, we didn't have any good tools until we developed them. And so when you don't have the right tool, you use the next best thing, and the next best thing was the Excel sheet. But I think there's no excuses now. I think really, if you're a CFO, a COO, a CEO of a company who's engaging and interacting with crypto assets, you need to run and find a solution. Hopefully, you'll choose Blox, but you really need to change the tool you're using. You wouldn't think twice of compromising your wallet security, but you can as easily compromise your financial stability and your and how compatible you are with regulation and finance regulation, just as easily using the wrong tools. And so I really think that in the overall grand scheme of things, there's several building blocks that the industry has to put in place in order to grow. Some of them are more obvious, but some of them are beginning to become obvious, really obvious. And I think definitely one of them is how you get your data right. How do you make sure that your data is private, organized, and compatible with the law and regulation?
Awesome stuff. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Alon. Is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to be aware of that's coming down the pike for Blox or the industry as a whole?
Definitely. I think that there's a lot of innovation going on, generally speaking, in the whole industry. Obviously, I would love everyone to use Blox, but one of the things I'm kind of keeping my eye on and learning and studying is actually something called decentralized finance, which basically includes, or it's a movement to build financial primitives in a decentralized way. So obviously, it's companies like MakerDAO and so on, and Compound, but it's a really fascinating stuff, and I think that it's incredible the value those things happen and kind of extract and create. And so, this industry is evolving very fast. And so anyone who's in this industry needs to, I think, kind of keep his eyes open and understand there's the tools always changing, and you need to have the right tools in order to win and create a successful company. And so my kind of recommendation is first, obviously, go to blox.io and subscribe to our newsletter and learn more about what we're doing. But also check around decentralized finance, which is the abbreviation is DeFi, basically, which is really exciting as well.
Well, again, Alon, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a true pleasure for our listeners. This is Alon Muroch, the CEO and co-founder of Blox. Alon, thank you so much, and keep us posted as you guys are going and clipping along in 2019.
Thank you very much. It was a blast being on your podcast, and thank you. Have a great day.
Awesome. You too.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you.